This video is going to cover the topic of long division and serve as a bit of a review. Be sure the date and topic are at the top of your page. The essential question for this video will be, how do we do long division both with and without remainders? And long division can sound like a lot of work, but I actually really enjoy the process of long division because it's just lots of little steps that we put together into solving one problem. And when you finish a long division problem, it feels really satisfying. Now let's say we wanted to divide 254 by 2. A lot of times people will say, well, let's just count by twos until we get to 254. But can you imagine counting by twos to get 254? That would take quite a while, and there's probably a lot of room for error. So instead, of course, we set up our division problem like this, right? Where we have one number here, and one number there at the top. And I just want to review a few of the terms that we have that we should use while we're talking about division. And our three terms are divisor, which does the dividing, dividend, which gets divided, and quotient, which is the answer. So in long division, it looks like this. The dividend is getting divided. It's inside this little box or house frame. The divisor does the dividing. It's on the outside. And the quotient is the answer that shows up at the top. So in my example, I'm going to go ahead and divide 254 by 2. 254 is what is getting divided. So that would go inside. So 254, and I'm being very intentional to use those spaces on my grid paper, and I would like you to as well. And then our 2 is what is our divisor, so it's outside, and up top is where we will write our quotient. To do the division, I use a little mnemonic device that I've written here. It's DMSB, and a lot of students remember this in lots of different ways. They say, oh, does McDonald's serve burgers? And of course, the answer is yes. So that means that yes, this will work for division. Some people say dad, mom, sister, brother. Whatever works for you to remember that order, just know that what it really stands for is divide, multiply, subtract, and then bring down. So in my example, right, I'm going to start here in this column. I need to know how many times 2 can go into 2. What is 2 divided by 2? And that's my D, and that's just one time. I'll make that a 1 here. One time. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply. So 1 times 2 is 2. I'm going to put that right below in that same column. The next step is to subtract, and 2 minus 2 is nothing. And the next step is to bring down. So I'm going to put a 5 right there. At this point, I need to go ahead back to the beginning of the cycle. So we're just going to keep cycling through this as long as we need. So now I would say, how many times does 2 go into 5? What is 5 divided by 2? And that is 2. That was my D. My M would be 2 times 2, which is 4. I would subtract. I have 1 left over. And then I bring down. And again, I'm not done yet, so I'm going to go through my cycle. How many times does 2 go into 14 now? 14 divided by 2 is 7. So I would have 7 times 2 would be my multiply. I would subtract, and here's how I know I'm done. There's nothing left over, and there's nothing left to bring down. The quotient is 127. And notice that I really used my columns here to help me stay organized. Let's do another one. Right? It's satisfying, right? You get to the end of the cycle. Let's try it another time. This time I have 745 divided by 5, and once again, I do not want to count by 5s. So I'm going to remember here that my 745 is what is getting divided. So I'm going to go ahead and put that inside this symbol, and it's being divided by 5. And I'm going to remember my steps here, DMSB, divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. And I'm just going to go through my nice organized columns here. So the first question is, how many times does 5 go into 7? And it only fits one time. And then remember, there's our little multiplication here, right? So 1 times 5 is 5. We subtract, bring down. How many times now, if we go back to the beginning of the cycle, does 5 go into 24? And that is 4 times. And 5 times 4 is 20. And I would subtract and bring down, and I would start again at the beginning. How many times does 5 go into 45? and that would be 9. 5 times 9 is exactly 45. I have subtracted and there's nothing left to bring down, so I know that problem is done. The quotient was 149. Now both of these examples happen to be numbers that ended really nicely, right? There was a 0 at the end, I had nothing left to bring down, so I knew I was done. I'm going to show you an example where that doesn't happen, because our numbers won't always be perfectly neat and tidy. I'm looking at this example of 851 divided by 2, and I know automatically that this is going to not work out really tidy because this is an odd number that's getting divided by 2. So I know there's going to be a little bit of a leftover. I'm still going to use my same setup, right? I still will go in the order of divide, multiply, subtract, and bring down. And I would go ahead with my normal process. 2 goes into 8 4 times, and 4 times 2 is exactly 8. There's nothing left over, but there's a 5 to bring down. 2 goes into 5 2 times, and 2 times 2 is 4. There's 1 left over, and there's 1 to bring down. And 2 goes into 11 5 times, and 2 times 5 is 10. Now, if I subtract, I still have 1 left over, right? But there's nothing to bring down. The good news is there's an answer to that, right? We could change 851 to say 851.0. We could say that, you know what, that's like $851 and 0 dimes, right? Or 0 cents. That is the same number. I've just given myself a little bit of extra, to work with to finish this problem off. Because now I have this, and I have one more thing to do. If I have a decimal here, I need to make sure that I put my decimal straight up above here so that I don't lose track of my place values. But now I have an extra 0 that I can bring down. And 2 does go into 10, and it goes in 5 times. And 5 times 2 is 10. And now there's nothing left over, and I don't need to bring anything else down, right? And now my number is complete. So my quotient is 425 and a half, or 5/10, or 0.5. And again, I was trying to be really careful using my grid lines to help me stay organized. For your turn, I'd like you to do 612 divided by 5, and I'd like you to use that standard process that we practiced, making sure you're being mindful of your grid lines. You will likely need to add a decimal and 0 because there will be a remainder here, so I want to make sure you show that as well. And a reminder that the essential question was, how do we do division, long division, with remainders and without remainders?